Hi, I'm Caroline, and like most of us who are very used to travelling abroad, I've had to rethink how I spend my time off from teaching. This October half term, I've had to resort to a plan B, which so far has not actually been too shabby. I've been surprised by nature discovered in South London when walking along the Wandle Trail to Mordenhall Park. I've stood and watched in awe at the tame deer that call Richmond Park home, and thoroughly enjoyed a jam-packed day out at the National Trust's Polesden Lacey, where I was able to take in the magnificent house, its immediate gardens, and the wider estate. In today's episode, I'll be spending an afternoon at Wakehurst trying to see the world through plants and trees in the Royal Botanic Gardens. Good afternoon and welcome to Wakehurst. We were not able to get morning tickets because apparently it's really popular, and I think that's in part because Wakehurst is part of Kew Gardens, but this is just outside of London instead. It's got over 500 acres of land that we are going to spend the afternoon exploring. A lot of the areas have been broken up into different parts of the world, which seems very appropriate at the moment given that we can't travel the world to see the plants. So by coming here we'll get to go to lots of different sections, and in each of those sections we're going to be able to see plants and trees and flowers from different parts of the world. The first place within the gardens that we've come to is Bethlehem Wood, and it's got native British species of birch, which we've decided to come here because it's got the beautiful yellow leaves in autumn, but we are absolutely surrounded by these bright red fungi. I assume that they're like toadstools, as they look very much like Toadstool from Super Mario. It's crazy. We saw one when we were at Wakehurst a few weeks ago, but all of the other properties that we've been to so far over half term, none that look like this. And then we get here within about 5 minutes of having arrived, and there are literally hundreds in here. We've just experienced a very unexpected rain shower, so we have now left the birch grove and we've come into, I think this part is like Australian and New Caledonian area. Growing over the rock, and the branches are so low, you're like having to duck underneath in order to be able to keep walking along the path. Along that first one, I was like, whoa, look at the roots of the rock, but as we've gone along, it's gotten even more impressive. perfect toadstool. And then you've got all of this fungi just growing out of it. I don't understand how trees this big can grow out of rock. I feel like there should be some information somewhere that lets us know how this is even possible, because it just seems like it's defying nature. Concludes the rock walk, and we started all the way back on the other side of the meadow over there, and it went all the way around it. And I think most people have dropped down actually onto the meadow to get to this point before we then continue onwards. And I say, if you're coming here, definitely don't drop down onto the meadow. Stay up on the side of the hill and do that rock walk, because it was phenomenal. Was someone who owned this estate back in the very early 1900s, I think from 1903 into the 1930s, and he played a really big role in funding expeditions overseas to be able to collect seeds that could then be planted into this area. But in 1987 there was quite a ferocious storm that hit this part of the United Kingdom, wiping out a lot of the trees. We're talking here about maybe 20,000 of them, 30,000 of them, which has meant that now the trees that are growing are a lot more native to the UK. This section, however, has got some redwoods that can be found in California. Saying that we'd come into the North American section, but this is now an Oregon maple, and given that we've walked past quite a few redwoods, it says to me we must be in the North America section. Even though the storm obviously destroyed a lot of the trees back in the 80s, obviously they've replanted and we've come along so much in time now. The trees are actually starting to really take hold and they're becoming quite mature and really quite spectacular. Badgers at first, which then I started to think was quite odd, because apparently this is the North American section, even though we missed the sign telling us that. And then I've realised I think they're raccoons, this guy's a bear, and then I think that's just the bear's butt on the other side. And I think, I'm not too sure what that is on the top, maybe a squirrel or a mouse or something, but the tail seems a bit too bushy for a mouse, so I'm thinking a squirrel. And if you look really carefully, there's even a tiny mushroom growing off of the edge of it, and then you've got loads of the red toadstools around the bottom with this amazing yellow backdrop. This is like a hidden gem within Wakehurst. timing is that we have now come into what's known as the Westwood Valley, and this has got trees growing in it that are native in Asia. I don't really travel very much of Asia, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of species of trees there are here. The North American section, even though we'd missed the sign, we've travelled so much in North America, as soon as we started seeing things such as the maples and the redwoods, we just knew straight away. But this one, had to really check the map to know where we were. Along this path we believe is the Himalayan Glade, and I know that in South London we have loads of parakeets which originated from the Himalayas. They're really noisy birds though, so I've not heard any, which surprises me a little bit given that this is the parakeet's native habitat. Once we climbed to the very top of the Himalayan Glade, we saw loads and loads of the blue tit, the great tit, the willow tit. We think that there might have been a couple of others as well. Someone had put out some bird seed on a few of the fence posts, and then when they were landing on it and pecking away at it, some of the bird seed I think was getting dropped off onto the ground, and then some pheasants turned up. We've seen some pheasants throughout the grounds today. Usually they've been quite skittish and then ran off under some trees, but I'm guessing when there was food on offer and we were just up very quietly on a bench, they didn't seem to mind so much. So after just having come out of the Himalayan Glade, we walked a little bit further up the path, and I can only assume that we must now be in the Japanese part of Asia. So we've got lots of Japanese acers, and just the colours in here are absolutely stunning. Again, no signs, but I think similar to North America in that it's just one of these sorts of trees that I think most people know where it originates from, but it's really peaceful in here with the running water of the small trickling waterfall and really bright colours. It's gorgeous. If there was ever any uncertainty as to whether we come into the Japanese section or not, if the Japanese acers were not enough, this is definitely a koi pond behind us, because I can see quite a few koi just fishing around in there. Actually too sure if earlier on I told you guys about what the deal is with Wakehurst. It is part of National Trust, so it's the National Trust who owns this land, but they've leased it out to the Royal Botanic Gardens, and they're the guys who oversee Kew up in London and Wakehurst here. So as part of, I guess, their arrangement, they have to allow National Trust members to be able to gain access into Wakehurst for free, so we haven't had to pay the entry fee. But I suppose the loophole and where they get to catch us out a little bit is that they charge us to be able to park the car. I think if you're here just for 30 minutes then it's free, but any longer than that it starts to go up, and for the amount of hours that we've just spent here today it's going to be costing us £10 for the car. So there's two of us, that's £5 each. They say that it's to go into the seed bank that they've got, where obviously they are taking seeds from all around the world to then be able to grow the plants and the trees that will then be in here, which I think, you know, is fair enough, but it is just their little way around it. And it does mean that unlike a lot of the other National Trust properties that we've been to this last week, this one we have actually had to pay a little bit of money for in order to be able to get in. Join me next time in the last video from my autumn series, where I'll head off to Sheffield Park and Gardens, where I'll catch the morning light glow surrounded by trees ablaze with colour, as well as dip into the park's history and catch a glimpse of the Bluebell Railway that takes its passengers to the National Trust site. If you haven't done so already, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can join me in my adventures.